late in the series. Did I give a spoiler declaration? I didn't. I didn't write one in the script. So I'm going to insert this one earlier in the video. I'm going to cut this section and shove it early in the video. I'm going to tell you, whoever's watching this now, that this is going to contain minor spoilers for My Youth Romantic Comedy Is Wrong As I Expected. So keep that in mind if you're going to watch. Deciding what you want to do is a difficult job. Deciding how you want to do something, at least for me, is often an even more complex one. I'm quite the loner. I always was in school. Since elementary, I was always the one with a book in hand at all times, usually finding myself reading as opposed to talking to people, even at the times that I may want to be part of the conversation. But even with that being the case, I'm quite okay with myself. Sometimes I'm happy to be myself, and sometimes I'm angry or hateful over the things I've said and done. And this state of being might be what connected me strongly to the behavior of Hachiman Hikigaya, the main protagonist of... Hold on, I gotta read this title. Yahare Ore no Seishun Love Kam wa Machigateru, I think. Otherwise known as My Youth Romantic Comedy Was Wrong As I Expected. I should probably mention here that at the time of recording this, I have only finished the first season, and all of my statements will follow that accordingly. At some stage, I'm gonna run out of script, so we're gonna find out what we're gonna do from there. But, we're just gonna figure it out. Hikigaya, or Hiki as many of the cast come to call him, is a pessimistic realist with the uncanny ability to see the worst in the structure of society no matter what. Miss Hiratsuka, the single desperate to mingle, thinks Hikigaya's attitude is less than ideal too, asking him to rewrite numerous papers and surveys due to the input he gave, and being the primary reason that he is signed into the service club, which is run by the blunt and cold Yukino Yukinoshita, who is one of the two remaining protagonists, aside from Hiki. Now these two, Hikigaya and Yukinoshita, are like two-thirds of the same coin. Like, they both have a very disillusioned, realistic view of how the world works, and both are very blunt and matter-of-fact about the things that they say. However, despite this identical approach, while Hiki is a clear pessimist, I would dare to describe Yukinon as an optimist. She leads the service club with the intent to help others, and even expresses a want to reach out to someone during their camp adventure when accidentally making them cry. After these two meet, it is not long before the final patch in this triangle, who joins shortly thereafter seeking assistance, Yui Yuigahama. Being of a cheerful and energetic disposition, she is a stark contrast to both the main character's realism and disillusionment, but despite not having nearly as strong overlapping qualities with the other two, it is this exact contrast which allows them to get along so well. Her positivity and excitement, even in the face of their personal positions, stands quite strongly as the energy that makes the train move, which is in itself quite fascinating due to how Yuigahama has a lot more trouble being blunt with people than either Yukinoshita or Hikigaya, being the type to try and mesh with everyone where possible. This show was recommended by a friend of mine when I asked for a good slice of life recommendation, and goodness did it deliver. The pessimistic attitude of Hikigaya made him a genuine challenge to like, but incredibly easy to believe, and I certainly understood where he was coming from. I've met and known people of this exact attitude, and even had a phase myself where I played the heavy loner who is abysmal about everything. And I think the fact that the show followed him specifically made it all the easier to understand where he came from as a person. The hardest person to believe, with that own sense of irony, was Yukinoshita. Specifically, because of all my years going through school, I never met anyone who was both devoutly reasonable and also as outspoken as she is. I've met both reasonable people and outspoken people, but the overlap is not nearly as strong. Generally, when people are most vocal is when they're being most emotional, and vice versa. That being said, she was fairly clear-cut as a person due to her direct nature. You could always see exactly where she was coming from and what her opinions were, from telling Miura that she hates her, to stating her dissatisfaction with Hiki's views of the world. The show overall is a school day slice of life, and like most shows of this type, the primary focus falls in how these characters act and react to the challenges of growing up, school studies, and the various requirements and the festivals. The show had been a number one suggestion of a friend of mine when I asked for either slice of life or shonen recommendations, and I will admit that it was pleasant to go through. I enjoyed how the characters worked like well-oiled gears conjoined with one another, and the value they came to hold for one another was incredible. Though there are signs of a love triangle, and I'm really not sure what I think or what I want out of that yet. And as I've only gone through the first season, I have no idea what the outcome will be, if there will be any. Though, unlike most shows, I'm also aware that there's a very strong neither option, just due to Hickey's personality. And that is where my script ends. So I guess I'm going off the cuff at this stage. My youth romantic comedy is wrong as I expected. I don't know, the show in general was just really odd and really interesting at the same time. It was neat to have a protagonist who was a pessimist. Like, I consider myself a bit of an optimist. I try to see the positive things in life, and I like when there are characters like Tanjiro from Demon Slayer who have a very nice and positive disposition about them. But it was a very refreshing experience to have a protagonist who's not that, who's not positive, who's very much like, oh, society is an evil construct that's built out of selfish desires of man for security. The short version of his understanding of the world, as I understand it, is no one is nice for niceness' sake. A lot of people are nice just to get something out of it. A lot of people are nice just to see things out of other people. A lot of people like to control situations, like to have attention, that sort of thing. He's very negative about the world. And it's not entirely unfounded. I mean, like I said, I described this sort of attitude as disillusionment. It is very much a case of like you will meet people in the world who are like that, who are completely negative, who don't see the positives in people, who want things only for selfish reasons. But that's never the full story. And the same with like Yui Gaharu's optimism. Although I think she can usually see Hickey's side of things, I do believe that her optimistic perspective puts her on the opposite side, where she's rather fairly illusioned. Late in the series, did I give a spoiler declaration? I didn't. I didn't write one in the script. So I'm going to insert this one earlier in the video. I'm going to cut this section and shove it early in the video. I'm going to tell you, whoever's watching this now, that this is going to contain minor spoilers for my youth romantic comedy is wrong as I expected. So keep that in mind if you're going to watch. Moving on. Later into the series, the group, the service club, and a few other members of the school who we have been introduced to all go on a camping trip. On this camping trip, all of the people involved acknowledge the lonely behavior of Rumi Tsurumi. Rumi Tsurumi. She starts behaving in a very lonely fashion, and you get to see both Hiki's incredibly negative point of view, where he's very much like, this is how it's always going to be, and you need to grow up and get away from these children and figure out how you want to live your own life and how you want to decide how you're going to go about your future, that sort of thing. Yui then comes about and she talks about the fact that she thinks that it's highly unusual to lose all of your friends from elementary school and that you would usually keep in touch with them. Whereas Hiki was saying that you usually don't keep your elementary school friends at all and you'd move on. These two opposite positions are very interesting because Yui is, when questioned, Yui then comes about to admit that she only has one or two friends from elementary school that she still keeps in contact with. Whereas Hiki, for example, has none. Both of them have their positions and their standings, but Yui's is a little bit more optimistic than the actual situation. She says 1 to 2 in a class of 30. That's a very small amount of people that she keeps with her, that she carries along with her. So the advice that Rumi shouldn't worry too much about the people that she's with now makes perfect sense. And it just kind of goes to show Yui's sense of optimism and also Hiki's pessimism. So Yukinon doesn't say terribly much about this situation, as I recall. But then she starts to display her own behavior, which is its own sort of unique. She gets in an argument with one of the other girls, and she, as a result, accidentally makes them cry. And this was like in the middle of the night, so she left her cabin to go stand in the woods and just kind of think for a bit about what she's going to do and how she's going to proceed. And I think that is fascinating because there are 3 points of different situations. Yui spoke about essentially her optimism about those situations and how she thinks that they could proceed in a better light than Hiki was putting them out to be. Hiki was putting them in the most bottom level light and how everything is just essentially the worst of the worst. And Yukinon was kind of off on her own sort of she got lost in her own situation, I guess, would be an interesting way to put it. Lost isn't exactly the right word. She got buried in her own situation because she had done something and she wound up going to think about and worry about that something else. Meanwhile, Hiki was the essential leader of the group who wound up trying to find a solution to Rumi's problem. But his solution was so cold. He genuinely wanted to put to test the children's trust in their counselors, which is what the role they were playing at that camp, in order to prove to them, to break apart their relationships and prove to them that it doesn't matter as much. And if everyone's a loner, no one will be. That situation ended well with Rumi showing a certain sense of bravery and saving the other kids, which undoubtedly helped her out as in that social aspect. Now, dialing to the final point, let us come to the end off. What does this show mean to me, I guess? I don't know. I've never done this format before, so this is just what I'm going with, okay? That's what we're going to do. What does this show mean to me? It's highly unusual. So, I know I said at the start of this that Yuki no Shita was the hardest one to believe for me, due to her outspoken nature. But that's not 100% true. In fact, it might even be the opposite. See, I wrote this a few days ago, like right after I'd watched it. So it's been a few days where I've been thinking about the things that I wrote down. I've been thinking about the show, and Yuki no Shita has honestly come across to me as probably the most believable by the end of it. Hiki is well up there, don't get me wrong, but the reason I say that is due to her experience in the woods and due to... So it's mostly how I personally relate to her interactions with her friends and things like that. Because I don't have a filter for my opinions, I guess. If I find a conversation worth getting into, you will hear the full breadth of my opinion. That's a tangent. Moving on. I don't even know where I'm moving to. I was talking about the show. My youth romantic comedy is wrong as I expected, and I got sidetracked about arguments and how I'm argumentative. Oh, so that sort of experience and going through all that, where I care about the result, leads me to relate a lot to what Yukinon actually experiences in the show herself, because she's very particular. She has her reasons, she has her rules, she has the way that she lives her life and the things that she does. And it's interesting because I know I've been there too. I know I've been in those situations. I've had to deal with them. I got a lot better as I got older, But literally, when I was in middle school, this kid, I can't really say his name because that's mean. I'll say the name that he doesn't go by, Alex. This kid named Alex. He actually signed in my yearbook. He wrote, "Keep on arguing with people," because he and I would always get into some sort of argument or another. Because he would say some factual statement of some kind, and he was a very confident speaker, so he would always say it in a very factual way. And I was always like, "Hold on, I don't believe that. I think that there's something there that's incorrect." Usually he conceded to me right out of the gate because we'd argued often enough that whenever I spoke up, I was usually talking about something I genuinely believed in, and he was just talking. So it was usually not something that he cared too much about, so he just surrendered it. There were some times that he stood his ground, and there were times where he proved me wrong, and I found that very pleasant. I found those moments made even more pleasant by the fact that he signed my yearbook that way. That was in middle school. He's a cool dude. I miss him. I don't have his contact information, so I can't contact him. I wish I could, though. I have a lot of friends that I should really talk to. Most of this is going to get edited out, but I had this idea in my head. I was like, I could drop the entire uncut version on Patreon, because I made a Patreon. Is anyone on it? No. I put one link there, and no one has commented whether or not it works, so I'm a little paranoid that it doesn't. And that was a non-paid page. This is gonna be on a paid page because, frick, if people are gonna see me be stupid, they better be paying up because I'm not putting my idiocy on the internet for. What am I talking about? I'm uploading this video. Of course, I'm putting my idiocy on the internet. However, I have some amount of control about how much idiocy I put on the internet, so that's what I'm doing. I don't even know if the audio quality of this is going to be good at all. If it's not, I'm probably going to have to... I have a good mic behind me, which I'll probably have to rig up in some freaking mishmash of parts and pieces so that it can sit in front of me, probably where the camera is, so that even if I lean back, it gives you that same sense of space. I've gotten so far off track. What was I even on about? Oh yeah. So these experiences of these arguments and knowing people and being a little bit stubborn at times and being a little bit procedural at times led me to relate a lot to Yuki no Shita, which led her to be the one that I related to the most. Though all of them and the way that they worked together and the way that they talked and the way that they interacted just warmed my heart, and it felt amazing, and it was so pleasant to watch. It was a really, really lovely slice of life, and I'm very happy that I got to watch it. I'm very happy that it was recommended to me. My friend also sent me a list of other things that he recommended, so I'll undoubtedly be cracking those open. Plus, I found a couple other shows. I've been fighting slimes for 300 years and maxed out my level, thereabouts, in terms of the title, which is another slice of life, a fantasy thing, isekai, which seems pretty funny. And then a far more serious one called Moriarty the Patriot, which seems very dark and dismal and very curious. Those are my opinions on Yahare Ore no Seishun Love Come wa Machigateru, or My Youth Romantic Comedy is Wrong as I Expected. Thank you so much for watching, whether you've watched the full thing or the part thing, whatever I wound up uploading and where. And overall, I hope you enjoy. If you wish to support me, if for some reason you think that my content is worth supporting, because we know I've got the most reliable upload schedule in the world, and my content is just spectacular, you can find me on Patreon and support me there. If not, however, you're always welcome to subscribe on YouTube just to see what I'll do next, whenever that is. Probably soon. I've been on a hype lately, and that's kind of led me to make 3 different videos, which has been very neat. And we'll find out what route I go down in terms of, the future. Oh, and if for some reason you play VR chat and you want to know what world this is, because for some reason you haven't seen it already, it's called The Treehouse in the Shade, and it is made by 1001. So, which is That's 9 in binary. So technically it's made by 9. Anyhow, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed. And I'll see you whenever. Bye-bye.